Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the last panel today, like a dessert after a very nourishing meal that we have been consuming since morning. It is not an easy task to keep you meaningfully entertained after such an exciting but at the same time exhausting day. But I'm sure that together with our great panelists, we won't disappoint you and won't spoil the wonderful conference that we are taking part in. My name is Tomasz Pietrzykowski. I have a pleasure to moderate the panel on science, innovation, and universities' global competitiveness. In a minute, I will introduce our panelists, but before that, just to give you some food for thought, let me just make one brief observation that might be a kind of a wider context of what we are going to talk about. Quite recently, in 1980, so 45 years ago, the Chinese economy was about 10 times smaller than the combined economies of the then European Union, consisting of much smaller number of states. And today, it is already bigger than the combined EU economy, despite the enlargement of the EU and the impressive economic growth of some, at least, of our countries, including, in particular, this eastern part of EU. And most probably, in the next 20 or 25 years, it will be, Chinese economy will be twice as big as the combined EU economies. So the kind of an overarching question that somehow hovers over the topic that we are going to discuss concerning universities is to what extent, or if or to what extent, the situation of our universities on a global market, so to say, is a function of that change that is so quickly taking place in front of our eyes, and to what extent it is one of significant causes of that situation. In order to answer that question, we need to dive into many details and many aspects of the question of our competitive advantages and capabilities to cope with universities and business companies all over the world. And in order to dive into those details, I will discuss and ask questions to our panelists, who are first Vilma. Probably there is no anybody in this room who is better known to all the rest of people present here than you, not only because of your being on this stage from the early morning today, but because of your role as Vice-Rector, professor, and organizer of many events and projects. So welcome to our panel. Mr. Manuel Heitor, former Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation in Portugal, and if I may add also the principal author of an important report on exactly those topics that we are going to discuss, the report commissioned by the European Union. So I hope you will tell us something more about the findings of that report. Mr. Marius Vaščega, if I pronounced that correctly, sorry, I tried to do that, Head of European Commission Representation in Lithuania. and Mr. Tomas Vitkus, CEO of Novian company, based here in Lithuania. So this is the briefest possible introduction of our panelists, but I would like now to make a second round of introduction, asking the panelists to say a little bit more about, let's say, their professional background, expertise, and specific particular perspective on which they approach, let's say, this question of competitiveness and innovative nature and capabilities of our universities. Let's begin with Professor Biejki and Vilma. The floor is yours.
Well, is it working? I guess it's working. Well, you mentioned this professional relevance. I would say that as a linguist, I perhaps would have little relevance when it is about corporate partnership with universities. But today we have heard a lot of good connections. And it is all about connecting different fields to really achieve results in our unstable and shifting world. And especially when I talk about transformations that the universities could bring to society. So it was mentioned a lot of times today that humanities perhaps could be a solution to different educational problems when we talk about the right mindset for the current world. So I think that that's how I may have this relevance to the topic. Otherwise, I'm a linguist, a sociolinguist. I'm interested in multilingualism and multilingualism in Europe and in general, the development of language competences. So that is my field.
Thank you. And I wouldn't say that it is so distant, because you can hear it from many, let's say, people, that the main problem in enhancing the innovation and competitiveness of universities is that we are not speaking the same language as business. So obviously, it's a little bit figurative speech, but nonetheless, this question of speaking the same language is absolutely crucial, perhaps, for, let's say, establishing this type of relationship that makes it possible to...
Absolutely, if I might just react. You know what's the key word everywhere in business, in politics, and all around? Just think for 1 second and I'll tell you. The key word is communication. So I think that is always the problem. Whenever something goes wrong, everybody says, okay, that was wrong communication. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Manuel, may I ask you to add something to your description?
Thank you so much for the question, but also for the organizers, for the opportunity to be here. I'll try to argue that we Europeans have a unique opportunity to align policies, to act in our institutions, and to accelerate research and innovation towards European competitiveness. But to give a new centrality of research and innovation, it requires definitely the activism of all of you, of all of us. It does not happen overnight. And we need really to join our common efforts. In our report that you just mentioned, Align, Act, Accelerate, there are 3 key messages. First and foremost, we all Europeans are now discussing the next framework program for research and innovation, and this is a unique opportunity to strengthen and to align the different visions throughout Europe of a new European context. And therefore we call for a transformative agenda for the next framework program 2028-34. Second, more and more we need to engage the young adults, and therefore we propose the Commission to launch Choose Europe, a Choose Europe program as a co-funding mechanism to provide better jobs, better careers, but essentially to engage young adults. Last but not least, our third message is more and more to take more risks and to really understand failures as a step to success. and this do certainly require we all change our current methods of assessment and funding research and innovation to be more inclusive and, above all, to accelerate high added values products and systems. And it is not only our reports. This morning was clear, President Niinisto, together with his own report, together with letter report on the European Common Markets or the Draghi report on the European competitiveness, these 4 reports call above all for a collective action of aligning and act on our current system to face exactly the new complex of uncertainty that you expressed in one of the main vectors, which is the increase of Chinese science.
Thank you very much. Marius, Manuel represents, so to say, the nation-state, member states of the European Union, and you represent, at least officially here, the European Commission. So tell us something about you and what you think about, let's say, the key to solve the problem of improving Europe on its innovative capabilities is more in the hands of the national governments or the European Union administration?
Thank you very much, and glad to be here. Glad to be at Vytautas Magnus University. Not the first time in this hall, always happy to visit Kaunas. We have close cooperation between the European Commission and the university. I've heard that European Commission Executive Vice President was speaking via the video link or send her video message, which is of course nice for an event like this. Unfortunately, I haven't heard, so I hope I will not contradict, to what I was saying, because I'm in the last few years an official representative of the European Commission here in Lithuania. But I've been working for EU since Lithuania's accession, since 2004, and my job was spanned through many things. But one thing is notable, and that is the connection between economy and policy. So, in fact, exactly what we're speaking here today. I think from the European Union perspective, it's always very easy to speak about higher education, because whenever I remind Erasmus, everybody smiles. You smile here too, I see. Why? Because this is probably the most successful EU program generally, and probably the most successful higher education program in the world. Started as a super small thing some 30 years ago. 35 years ago, I believe, and now it spans all over, and I think whenever somebody asks me what is an advice I can give them, a young person, I always say, go at least once for Erasmus, because all this cross-border dimension provides such a good thing. Now, coming back to your question and putting a little bit things into perspective of China, US, Europe, and how we look. I wonder whether this change of percentages of the world economy, do they really reflect that we are bad, or do they reflect that someone else is very good? Because, economy is of course not everything. If you ask people where they would like to live, majority will answer Europe for various reasons, for a combination of various things, be it economy, but also, life, the way of life you can be having in Europe. It's incomparable, these things. So when we speak about economy and when we do those kind of comparisons, we have to keep in mind that economy is not everything. But of course, we're here to speak about economy. So there, indeed, we need to see what are the strong points of our system and what are the weaknesses in our system. And I think, one of the weak points of our system. And by the way, for Erasmus, it's a strong point because we have a pretty good funding interface. But I think when we speak about other things beyond Erasmus, the funding interface is quite complicated. So one of the weaknesses which we have, and you know, Draghi, who made a report last year, and an important report, really, to see the connection between universities and so on, he says we need to have a one-stop shop for innovation. Also encompassing universities too in all that game. So I think this is an important first point. Second point is that we must reward impact and not input. Here, you know, I'm speaking about publications versus patents, startups, and so on. So that's the second point. And the third point, I think we need even stronger cross-border cooperation and various alliances, because this is what the EU is about. We are 27. We have to always remember that we are 27. And only by combining all that force together, we can be, you know, making full potential, using full potential of us. I think I'll stop here, but I have more for other interventions.
Okay. Thank you very much. I smiled because indeed all over the world people envy us. You know, at all universities that I visit, you know, out of Europe, their reaction is the same. So they envy us the Erasmus program as something that, you know, they dream of. But on the other hand, it is also telling to some extent that having for so many years such a successful program, it's so little translate into, let's say, this actual success of our universities in terms of competitiveness, in innovation, and so on. So perhaps we are lacking some element, let's say, that should be a kind of a continuation of Erasmus program for those who graduate and so on. I have no idea, perhaps it will come back, this topic. So, Tomas, very nice first name, by the way. Tomas, you represent business, so in many academic discussions, the big absentee, I would say, that everybody is talking about, you know, how we should collaborate with business, what we can to offer, and so on, but very rarely, let's say, the actual representatives of business take part in such discussions. So I would like to begin with two questions. The first is, what is Novian? And the second, do you need universities for your company and for its development? And please be honest, not polite. Not necessarily.
Thank you, Tomasz. So first of all, big honor to be here. I'm second time in my life on the stage. First time I was 25 years ago getting my bachelor diploma, I believe. So it's very good to be back. Novian, we are an IT company. I think by EU we are called large IT company, even we feel very small. We have 300 people. We are doing headquartered here in Lithuania, in Vilnius. But we do have our business in some other European countries. We have Estonian, Norwegian office. We do IT projects in Africa. We have our office in Rwanda as well. We do some projects in Brazil. So we are a mid-sized IT company which is trying to do business globally. And yeah, we very much feel that competition around us when we go globally, but I mean, we feel good. And 95% of our employees are from universities. Maybe that 98%. I think it's really in IT industry, that's a good and bad thing. I think it's good, it's a pleasure to work with those highly educated people. On the other hand, I believe that in future we need, I mean, there are a lot of basic things in IT industry, so sometimes it's strange that university people with diploma, with master degree need to do those basic things. But yeah, I think universities are doing a great job. I mean, the talent pool we have here in Lithuania, and I think in general in Europe, is a perfect one. I think the problem is somewhere else. I think we got used to very good life and got a little bit lazy. So I think that's the issue.
Did I understand correctly that you are back here after 20 years after your graduation? You haven't been here?
No, I've been on this stage. I haven't been, but in university, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And I mean, there are beautiful jazz festival in this hall happening. So I think a lot of us been here dancing and having a good time.
The evening is, you know, quite close. Okay, so guys, the first question that I would like to ask all of you, in order to a little bit encourage you to refer to each other's answers and perhaps even to dispute or argue a little bit with the perspectives that each of you is going to offer. But the common question to all of you is the request actually to identify the most important, most significant challenges and opportunities that European universities have to enhance their capability to compete on a global market in terms of both scientific research and, above all, innovative contribution to economic development. So let's begin in the reverse order, perhaps with Tomas this time.
So we need to talk more with universities and business, and I think those conferences, these conferences like this, is a good tool as well. But yeah, I think there is this joke, and I think everybody heard that US is about innovating, China is about copying and being very fast, and we are about regulating. So I think we need universities' help to change this paradigm somehow in Europe. Because we in business, we don't feel capable on working on that. So I think of course those regulations, they protect us, and sometimes we feel very good about it. But I think our success depends, can we be successful outside of Europe? And in those countries we meet all the global competitors, and we need people who are willing and enjoying that competition. And this regulation and this, what is the English word, greenhouse effect we're creating here in Europe sometimes is not really helping us to go outside of Europe. So I think we love all those EU-funded programs and EU-funded projects, but sometimes we get spoiled by them. So we need, you know, I might be shooting into my own leg, but I mean, sometimes less funding is a good thing as well. Then we learn things to do and we get more competitive.
Very dangerous thesis. It is not a joke, but a serious claim made recently by one of the Chinese authors that, you know, the key difference between, he referred to the US, comparing China and the US, is that China is ruled by engineers, while the US by lawyers. And I think that it is even more true in respect of Europe, although I'm a bit skeptical about, let's say, whether we won't exaggerate with this over-regulation here in the EU. And perhaps it could be also the follow-up question to you. Is it really such a huge obstacle, let's say, in developing business that if we just get rid of all those regulations, suddenly European companies, you know, become much more competitive and, you know, able to win, let's say, with those from other parts of the world?
Of course, it's a little bit exaggeration, but you know, startups here in Europe, we look for new ideas. The EU money, somebody in US or China, we are looking for business money. So of course, we are learning a little bit different perspective of doing business. But I mean, there are a lot of good things here in Europe, and the talent pool, I think that's where our universities and our young people, I mean, they are great. So now the question is, what can we do with that great talent pool, and how to utilize it in a better way? I mean, we go to Africa. A few years ago, we won a big project in Brazil. We still have unique capabilities here, and a lot of things we do here in Europe, for us, they look like normal ones, but when you go to countries like Brazil, they still feel that's very innovative. So, I mean, we have a lot of advantages, and I think it's a big, I mean, universities educated the people a little bit in different ways. So we have this advantage, and we still have time to use it. So, I mean, we are in a very good shape, but with regulation, I mean, if we take AI, now in Europe, we are thinking on one hand how to invest, on the other hand, we are creating, I think we will be like first union, which will have AI directive, which maybe is a good thing, but you know, everybody knows in the world that we are already behind US and China, far away. So starting from directive doesn't make much sense. I mean, we're already behind so much that we will not have what to regulate.
You know, I'm a lawyer by profession, so I could say that we lawyers in Europe are much more innovative than lawyers in everywhere else. So we can,
which is good
produce much more innovative regulations than others. Okay, now, Marius, please share with us your perspective on these opportunities, challenges and opportunities issue.
Well, I think there are various angles to how to approach this question, but let me first also agree a little bit with the previous speaker who was saying that universities in Europe are producing a great pool of very talented young people who are then actually creating a number of very good also companies and applying for a number of very successful patents. But then, when we look to the biggest companies, the ones which have grown from the small ones to the big ones, the so-called unicorns, we like the word in Lithuania because there are a few which have grown here. We always see that there are very few in Europe, but many in US and also some in China. And then, we are thinking, so where is the problem? Is it really the problem of universities? Is it really, where is that problem? And I think Professor Draghi, when he was doing his famous report to which I already referred of last year, he pinpointed the problem very well. And the problem is not at all the universities. The problem is apparently the fact that we are having 27 instead of 1 capital markets. And that's why we do not have so many possibilities for funding. And while at the very early stage you can help with state or European funding somehow, of course it always with various strings attached and so on, we can simplify, we can come to that. But then when you need to grow and grow quickly, you can't do those things. You need much more money. And then you have to take it from the private sector. And in the private sector, Europe saves a lot, but usually keeps that in the banks. Does not invest into the capital markets, because if you invest it into the capital markets, that's being converted into bonds. If it's being converted into bonds, then somehow, it has to be the whole chain. That's why everybody is moving to the United States. So the problem number one, which I see, and of course he pinpointed many more problems, but for me, the problem number one is in fact funding at the stage of growth. And this is where Europe is facing the problem. That's one thing. Second thing, if we are also going a little bit away from the universities, is, and that is this myth with the regulation, not regulation, and I will specifically speak also on the AI, but first, generally. Again, we are 27, and let's take the example of these capital markets. So what does that mean? That means that we have 27 different regulations in each member state on capital markets. 27, not one like in US, not one like in China, although capital markets there is a completely different question. So it might sound very strange, but actually the first answer to much of regulation in the EU is the regulation by the EU and not by the member states. It's actually harmonization, because once you get one set of rules, you replace 27 sets of rules. So kind of counterintuitive, huh? Because when we are speaking, Europe regulates, but actually when Europe regulates, it removes so much of regulation of the member states. Okay, there you start facing political problems, to what extent do member states want to allow the EU to do things and so on. But the point is like that. And now AI question. Okay, probably one again can be looking at it from various perspectives. But the question we have to ask ourselves: can we allow to be like China in the sense of human rights, in the sense of the society that we have created? Can we allow ourselves? I mean, will we not be destroying without these rules for AI? Because those who use the AI, those who study the AI, those who go deep into the AI, they know the opportunities, business opportunities, but they also know the opportunities for control and opportunities for changing the society. So the question is, can we really allow not to have regulation? And then there is also this other angle when you do something at the EU level. It creates a certain legal certainty and understanding, and also the first move advantage. Those who are operating in Europe, they have the first move advantage because they know that if it's working in EU, it will work everywhere in the world.
Thank you. Especially the first part of your answer is, at least for me as a representative of the university, a little bit heartwarming. I would say that we are more the victims of the fragmentation of Europe rather than, somebody that could be blamed for, let's say, the lack of success of, let's say, those companies at a certain stage of development, that they cannot grow bigger. It is not the, let's say, deficiencies of let's say, what we are doing or providing them with, but rather, let's say, the objective obstacle that is, the scale of internal market and internal capital capabilities, let's say, of particular member states compared to such markets like China and the US. So in this sense, it's good to hear, I would say, for the universities at least. And Manuel, how those answers what they have in common with the conclusions of your report?
Thank you so much. Let me be very clear. We know more and more, particularly in the last year, that Europe is the most robust and in the most reliable parts in the world. And also the most efficient paired to the resources involved. We are not a federation, so we cannot compare with the United States. We have human rights and the freedom of thought, so we cannot compare with autocratic regimes like in Russia or in China. And we are also the most efficient due to our diversity. So we should not blame about fragmentation. We are by nature a diversified region, and we should be different and build on our diversity from the others. And by being proud of the European project, we need to understand that it is definitely different from the others. We also need to understand that when we look to all the competitors, we are lagging behind, for instance, in investments, not only in universities, but in the research and innovation ecosystem. So if you ask the question about European universities in general, I will try to answer in 3 ways. First, always to excel in their main target of education and research, because universities are just part of a very complex and increasingly diversified ecosystem. Second, to enlarge and to diversify the supply. We have already discussed Erasmus, but please don't forget that current figures show that in Europe only, until now, 40% of 20 years old young kids participate in higher education. So in average, we still have 60% of young adults out of higher education. And we should be proud of the Erasmus, which until last year has engaged over 16 million European citizens, but they only represent a very small fraction. The current target is to get to 20% of the students. So there are still a lot of young adults completely excluded from this. So enlarging, even compared with the United States, we need to enlarge and diversify our higher education system to engage more and more, particularly in times of an increasing polarization, political and social polarization of our societies. So more and more engage everyone, and every single young adult will be a critical point. Last but not least, I'm really convinced that more and more, apart from the focus on education and research, is also or is becoming to be more and more part of the university system in Europe to collaborate with public and private systems to create better jobs. When we look at the increasing polarization of our societies throughout Europe, and also looking at what happened in the United States, when we see many young adults supporting populist movements, we need to better understand, and the European Science Policy Research Center has clearly alerted for that. We need to understand the need for improve the quality of jobs for young adults in Europe. And this is rather complex, but is becoming a new task, certainly cannot be taken by universities per se, but the need to collaborate with public and private institutions to foster a better quality of jobs for young adults. And now if you look from not only the inside universities, but from the public policy point of view, I believe that we more and more need a portfolio of incentives. And actually, also recalling Mario Draghi 2 weeks ago in Brussels, the current European funding is not enough. And therefore, how can we essentially align all our countries to raise the additional resources we need to provide a better future for young generations is a concern of our generation at the current time.
Thank you. It's more and more heartwarming, I would say, because, Tomas said that, we provide him with excellent graduates, alumni, very well educated, and so on and so on. The problem lies perhaps in the limitations of capital markets and the limited scale of them within our nation state, and perhaps the main challenge is the quality of jobs for, let's say, our alumni. So taken all together, sounds as if we are doing great as universities, and all problems and challenges around us. Vilma, would you agree with that we are doing perhaps it's easier to see the deficiencies from inside than from outside. So would you agree we are doing such a great job?
Thank you, Tomas. Maybe it's because we are at the second half of the day, getting toward the end of the day, and life becomes more colorful and happy. So, to continue on that good note, I would also like to share a success story, actually, of what we have done here in Lithuania, and together with partners in the field of cooperation with partnerships with corporate business. Actually, it started basically like a year ago, maybe a bit more, when two professors from Massachusetts Institute of Technology of Lithuanian origin, Gediminas and Nomeda Urbonas, came to us with an idea, or brought the idea to Lithuania, to start cooperation with the First World University, with Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And actually, it's very interesting that at MIT, they have this notorious motto, we are not the best, we learn from the best. Although, in fact, they are the best according to QS rankings. So, but that was actually a very challenging idea. And of course, it takes more than one university in Lithuania to cooperate with MIT, to stand on more or less equitable footing. And encouraged by Lithuanian Research Council, we took, Lietuvos University, we took responsibility to act as a coordinator of this initiative. And a year ago started assembling a consortium. And Tomas, with Novian technologies, is actually part of the consortium. So we managed to gather 12 members. 5 major universities in Lithuania, 1 art academy, 4 business companies, and 2 research institutes. So really a very interesting consortium, and in fact, even our colleagues at MIT were surprised that we managed to have a consortium of that kind of composition, where businesses, universities, and research institutes act together for a goal. And of course, you have to have a very important goal to really, to keep that initiative and to really see the vision of partnership stronger than the own interest. Because it's very easy to just collapse to somebody's own interest. And that is actually what kept us moving forward. And you mentioned that very important aspect that in Europe we perhaps too much focused on input rather than impact. And that is something that is a reverse mindset that we understood comes from MIT. They are focused on impact, and for that they have that very clear ecosystem of how they cooperate with businesses. And in that ecosystem, one important element that the universities have, or actually in that case MIT has, is this right entrepreneurship or entrepreneurial mindset that they try to develop in their students. So basically they have a very simple formula that we could adapt here in Europe. That is this entrepreneurship mindset. And then another thing that Marius mentioned, the venture capital. So one element is the mindset, another element is the venture capital, and that's how you, in a way, encourage the young minds, the talents, to come up with startup ideas and implementation of startup ideas right away. So basically, as Gediminas shared, now what is the problem of MIT student in his or her 3rd year of studies? Well, I still haven't created my startup. So when our students will have those problems in mind, I think we will be perhaps getting ahead. In the chase of China and the US. So I think that this is something that we are happy about in Lithuania. We're really proud of having created it. Of course, it's still the beginning. We'll see how that partnership holds, because the true challenges perhaps are awaiting of how we manage to keep together, how we manage to come to impact rather than just trying to develop the steps ahead. But I think that is a good way, and maybe Tomas could actually add something from Novian perspective, from the business perspective, but we are in the same boat. And I think that we are now just on our oars to go forward.
Yeah, please respond.
So, but I can just, maybe there is such situation when in Lithuania lately we are having good thinkers and good people around. So this MIT initiative, I think it's a great initiative. But I think, small is beautiful, so that's what we should be proud here in Lithuania, that it takes really a few calls or it takes a few minutes to go to different offices and meet people, and we can do some things jointly, which you know, I think you mentioned as well the word communication. As soon as people start communicating, that good ideas come up and good things happen. So these things are happening. The question is, do we need them, how to make them more happening even faster and, you know, bringing some, I think it's a great input at the moment. So we need some results. But, you know, without a first step, there will be no results for sure. So I think we have, that's what I already mentioned, that this universities in Lithuania, you know, I mean, they are doing a very nice progress. So I don't know if, you know, if they would be doing even better progress, then it will be a challenge for us, for business, to catch those students. So, you know, we need to. But I was thinking, you know, in business sometimes it's very easy for us in business to measure our success. You know, you look at profit, you look at revenue, you look at maybe geographical expansion. I was wondering, because, you know, I'm not, I don't, how to measure the university success. And maybe, you know, if we could add some cooperation with business and how we measure universities' cooperation with business, and if we would measure that, then, you know, we would maybe have even bigger cooperation. But I don't have answer. I just thought right now that this measurement could exist.
This is exactly the question that I wanted to ask you next. To some extent, to prevent us as representatives of universities to get too self-satisfied listening to our discussion, that, you know, we like to think about ourselves as not only suppliers of well-educated job candidates, as something more. And that question that I wanted to ask to you is, do you feel that, you know, universities have to offer to you anything more than well-educated people that you can recruit and build your company on their basis? Because this is perhaps, let's say, the second part of that picture, that we are obviously an education institutions, that it is our core business, let's say, to make sure that companies like yours have access, let's say, to sufficiently well-educated candidates. But it is not only that. So we want to be something much more, let's say, that our contribution to let's say, innovation and economy should be much wider. And the question is, to what extent we are capable already to meet, let's say, that expectations of ours.
So at least from our company perspective, we tried a few options with university. One, of course, as a talent pool you prepare, so that's, of course, the natural one. The second one, I think we try to use the universities as trainers for our people for different knowledge and skills. And the third option, we are trying, and we will continue trying, doing joint projects where universities and businesses participating. On this third option, I believe that's a very interesting field, which, you know, I think both sides, and universities and business, we are learning a lot, because the cultures within universities and within business organizations most probably are not exactly the same. But I strongly believe that those cooperation projects on innovative ideas on different businesses are a very interesting field, where, at least from our perspective, we are very open and we are always looking for such initiatives. And I think at the moment we're having at least 4 or 5 initiatives where we are cooperating on a different business initiatives together with universities.
Thank you, Manuel. I see you wanted to add something or to respond.
Universities do exist for centuries, and we know very well what they mean. And actually, it will be always the focus on education and on the creation of frontier knowledge, but more and more they act as economic actors in society. But they do not replace firms or public institutions or social institutions. They are one type of institutions, and we know it very well. And when we compare with our global competitors in the other side of the Atlantic or in China, we cannot forget that we in Europe, in average, fund universities at much lower level than our global competitors. Funding per researcher or funding per student in Europe, in average, is half of the United States currently at 2025 values. So we should be proud, but by being proud of what we have been over centuries in Europe, we need to acknowledge that there are limits of what we are asking universities with the existing and it is not our report. Mario Draghi says exactly the same thing. Mario Draghi 2 weeks ago said the money which is currently available is not enough if we want really to thrive. And we should be proud, by the way, we in Europe have developed the framework program, and the jewel of the crown, as many people say, is the European Research Council. So we have done it. And some of you may remember 25 years ago, and particularly 20 years ago in 2004, when the Commission launched the idea, Philippe Bousquet in particular, of the European Research Council, people say that will be impossible to build in Europe. And we have done it. We have built a totally independent research council which funds frontier research in the humanities, in the social sciences, in the biomedical science, and in engineering. So we have examples of excelling in Europe at a small scale when we compare with our global competitors, but we have done it. So we need to do more of that, and it is the message in much of our report.
But referring to your experience as a science minister in Portugal, do you think that it is just a question of funding, or are there any other policy instruments on the national level that could be implemented to enhance this kind of collaboration that Tomas mentioned?
Definitely yes. We know for decades or centuries science is social. So it depends always on the context and on the social conditions under which science and knowledge interacts. And that is the reason why it's so interesting to understand and to add value of the existing European diversity. European universities here are different from elsewhere. And we should add value out of that the diversity, and therefore we need to more and more understand the key role of the European centralized programs, particularly to foster collaboration and to act on areas like frontier research, but also more and more on disruptive innovation. We have already been mentioned here the role of startups. We should acknowledge that over the last 5 years, and the data is in our report, we all in Europe have created more startups than the United States. But by being proud of that, we also should acknowledge that the scaling up process has not been possible because of the financial markets and the way they operate in a quite fragmented way in Europe. So there are many, many ways to help changing and improving the situation. But again, we have a reliable base where we can strengthen. And based on our report, the Draghi and the Enrico Leto report, the Joint Research Council of the Commission organized during the summer a very important debate how to move in the coming decades. And many of the ideas, again, bring this idea of align the national and European initiatives. Actually, the debate these days is very much in terms of a close articulation towards a potential merger of all the national science foundations with the European Research Council to create a very large European science foundation, and on the other hand, to diversify the innovation funds toward European regions, because place-based innovation is very much dependent on each region, and this is a process of moving towards an European context where we understand what can have a European dimension, what needs to have a regional dimension, and is a discussion going on these days in Europe. Also understanding the beauty of some European models, but the need always to align with very diversified existing models in different regions, because, hopefully enough, we are diverse and we should add value out of that, the diversity. Let me give you an example. In Portugal, over the last, say, 8 years, we promote what we call collaborative labs. Collaborative labs are collaborations between universities and the companies, but also public institutions, to create jobs and to diversify the type of institutions. That is a model where, for instance, you find similar models in the zone of Madrid, in the Netherlands. In Germany, you have a completely different models with public foundations like the Fraunhofer or the Helmholtz Foundation. So we don't need to have the same model throughout Europe. We need to articulate and to align the different models under a common European context, because our competitors, more and more, are outside Europe, are not inside Europe. And the idea to bring together and to align, to really understand that in the current increasing fragmentation of multilateralism, our competitors are outside Europe.
Yeah, and following, let's say, to what you just said, let me just put it as an open question, and perhaps I would invite Marius to respond to that. Do you really think that, this kind of, let's say, diversity among the higher education system and research funding systems on a national level is our advantage more than disadvantage? Isn't the success of like Bologna process or Erasmus program a strong proof that, the more harmonized or even unified the principles on which this sector of the whole European Union operates, the better outcomes. So perhaps it is an obsolete situation that universities are still kept as a matter of national governments, despite, let's say, a serious attempt to build a fully Europeized, if I may use that word, system of like one single European Research Council instead of local, smaller and let's say better or worse functioning, sometimes politicized also, agencies that have, let's say, local policies, sometimes not very consistent with one another. What do you think about, let's say, that dilemma?
Yes, I think it's a good idea. No, I think you're asking a convinced European. So from my perspective, the answer cannot be different. I always think that we find good European solutions, and in my previous intervention, I already talked about the fact that when we have 27 systems, you replace it with one, it becomes simpler. But on the other hand, we also have to deal with the reality. I mean, in order to do these type of things, you have to, to change our founding treaties, which is a process which will take super long. So I think we have to deal with what we have, and and to use those treaty provisions wisely. We still will be having those 27 systems, but we need to work, and this is what is happening. We need to work with the governments of different member states and try to find, to convince them, to find the solutions why they should be coming together, you know. Some of the solutions we are already working, the European Universities Initiative with various alliances. We have the European Research Area Policy Agenda. We have the funding opportunities which are being merged, and by this we are convincing as well to go one or another way. You know, we have now new things coming. I mentioned before this, all this financial markets. So there we have the scale-up strategy. We also just recently released the reskilling strategy at the European level. And there you put various things and then you test it with it. This is the method. You test it with the member states. You see which fly better. And then you go ahead with them. Of course, this is not a full-scale harmonization. But we work with what we can and we try to produce the results. If you ask me again whether I would like it differently, yes, I would like it differently. But you know, let's do the best what we can from what we have.
Thank you. And last question before we invite also the audience to ask questions, Vilma, to you, even more difficult than the previous one, Marius. Global competition is really a ruthless, brutal game. So in order to really, let's say, try to outcompete, let's say, the leaders, in particular Asian ones, but Americans as well, we would have to, let's say, press our researchers, our colleagues to, let's say, maximum effort, focus, dedication. Aren't we too lazy in Europe for that, or too spoiled, I would say, to be able, let's say, to sacrifice too much to win in that game in which, you know, every moment of weakness, you know, is immediately somehow punished by competitors. It's similar like in business. So in this sense, obviously the more, let's say, incentives and let's say internal drive you have, the bigger chances you have to really win. What do you think about that?
Yes, I think that that brings me to this saying that, okay, lazy people are usually the smartest because they try to somehow survive without not being too diligent, right? So I think that, you mentioned this, whether we should pressure even more the researchers to deliver, right? And Marius said it very correctly. Input is not the answer, and perhaps we really have to be wise and smart. And I will repeat this motto from MIT: learn from the best. We need to not only learn from the best, but also work together with the best. And take the best from that cooperation. So I think that is the way. We need to really consider very wisely where we invest our time, not only money, right? And to make those wise decisions. We've been learning a lot through that cooperation with MIT, even if we haven't received very tangible results. But we have received a lot of know-how. And a lot of know-how that actually even came not from MIT per se, but from our cooperation in that consortium. We see studies, we see research from different perspectives. I mean, the academic world and the business world. And this gives us a lot of good input. Now we are starting working on a study module that will be designed. We are starting now designing it together with the businesses of the consortium. So all the universities, and you understand me, that universities working together is always not easy, to put it softly, and then businesses together. And the idea is actually to really have it interdisciplinary, from really have it combined from different perspectives. For instance, the model will be on educating engineers. And that could be very fundamental, very specific, very narrow focused. But that came from the businesses, from Ignitis Group, who is also members of the consortium, that they need engineers with much more skills. Well, in Lithuania, it was understood that there are many good projects that were not implemented. I mean, energy projects that were not implemented due to the fact that community was not ready to accept them. So you need communicative skills. You need empathy. You need to understand how to show empathy. You need to understand how to talk to the community, how to engage community, all kinds of skills that are necessary for the project to be successful. So I think that our way is not to stress our researchers out of their last capacity to do anything. Our way is to really be smart, to really work in teams, and that is another example that we've learned from MIT. When they start a project, they always think, okay, what competences do we need for it? Doors are open everywhere. Okay, we start that project, fine. We need an architect here, we need a designer, we need somebody who will visualize our idea, we need somebody who will write about it. So let's take the best of all the capacity that we have at our university. Let's put them together, and then perhaps nobody needs to be stressed and pushed to the limits, as sometimes happens in academia. So that's my take on it.
So in your opinion, the complaints that we have, for example, at our university, more and more often from some of our colleagues that, please don't send me email later than, let's say, 4 p.m. because, I cultivate work-life balance, and, don't bother me with, my professional duties in the afternoon because, I have my leisure time and so on. It is not an obstacle, let's say, to compete with, the leaders of global competition.
This one late email will not change anything.
Again, heartwarming answer. Okay, we have 5 minutes for questions from the audience. I know that it is very late, so it's not easy to mobilize, but perhaps there are some.
Tomas, it's over here.
Oh, come on.
Maybe I'll be quicker to bring.
So actually, I'm wondering why we are so focusing on competition. I think this is not really our problem, because what we want is a good life, and I think it's a good life in a changing environment, and also with the demographic change in some countries at least. And I think we have to get prepared for it. So I think. So we need more resilience against storms, other weather issues. For instance, we have to think about how we can organize care for older people, how we maintain our infrastructure, and how we find solution against climate change. But instead we are focusing on unicorns to get, I don't know, the new iPhone or what kind of product we cannot imagine now. So does it really help us? So I think there are so many open problems, and I would really prefer to focus on solving these obvious problems that we are facing, instead of looking forward to solutions that we don't miss so far. Perhaps this is not a question yet, but I would like to hear your opinion on this.
I couldn't agree more, by the way.
I have a concrete question, Peter Hanberg from Portugal, and maybe I start with Manuel Heitor and asking him to explain a bit where the money that you were speaking about that we need for research and universities should come from. How can we actually ask for this, and how can we get more money? That's a good question.
That is a an excellent question.
You might need it again. Thank you.
Again, I would like to use the example of one of the most recent crises that we Europeans should be proud of the way we manage COVID. Essentially, if we look at today in COVID, there are several written analyses of what in Europe has been done. I will identify three key issues. A clear centrality of research and innovation. We had in Europe the capacity to produce vaccines, RMNA, and that was inside the research labs and was a unique opportunity for centrality of research. Second, all the member states for the very first time authorized the Commission to go to the financial markets and take debt and build the Recovery and Resilience Fund. Actually, Mario Draghi 2 weeks ago, and he is the former president of the European Central Bank, was discussing with President von der Leyen the need to go again to debt and to the financial markets. Last but not least, if you remember in COVID, apart from the centrality in research, apart from going to the financial markets through debt and build the Recovery and Resilience Facility, a third clear instrument which was done for the very first time in Europe was European public procurement to buy and distribute vaccines. This idea of European public procurement has been very complex to implement in any other way. We see in our report, Mario Draghi mentioning in his report, Enrico Letta mentioning in his report, President Niinisto this morning also in his report in European security, he also mentioned the need to really understand that there are no borders to threat and we need to consider European security through European public procurement system. So I will argue that these three instruments that uniquely in Europe we have done after the COVID should be used again to face the new crisis and the new war situation that we are facing for the last 3 years and a half. Again, we should be very clear that the proposal presented, in my view, by President von der Leyen in mid of July for the next framework program is a good starting point, but not enough. Again, clearly in our report for the framework program, we have suggested at least 220 billion aligned with Mario Draghi. This proposal is 175, but apart from that level of money is not enough. We need new European own resources, which is this way to get the financial markets. We know it is not consensual, but beyond all these reports, which has been commissioned by the European Commission, take also, and I will conclude with this statement, take also the work the Nobel laureate Jean Tirole published a few months ago about what he called the European mid-tech trap. We may not agree on his recommendations, they are not consensus, they have not been throughout Europe, but his economic analysis is very clear. We have had very low levels of public investment in Europe, and most of the public investment at national and European level over the last 20 years was oriented to technologies of low and medium intensity, particularly focused on the automobile industry. And this idea that we need to raise public investments towards higher added value products and systems, which again is in all these reports which we have been mentioning over the day, it is also clear, will require more public investments. And this is the key question of our current financial system, which do not allow because of the limits of debt do not allow that public investment. And therefore, Mario Draghi solution and President von der Leyen in early July in the European Budget Conference was clear. We need new European own resources. And if member states do not agree with that, it's impossible to have additional funding level. So this is a very complex situation, politically, financially, economic, but the current levels of investment in Europe are very low compared with our global competitors. And to create value, we need what in the European language is the new European own resources, which is the idea to go to the financial markets.
Thank you very much. And the last question for today goes to the center of the audience. Yeah, behind you. And then we will go to the long-awaited and well-deserved dinner.
Thank you very much. Simona Kustec, University of Primorska from Slovenia. Congratulations for everything heard right now. I have a slight revision proposal for the title. If we just replace competitiveness with cooperation, what then your answers would be? My dear colleague, Manuel, actually already addressed early in the beginning that there are many, many differences among us on global continents. But are we maybe right now living in the times where maybe cooperation would be a changer of the game, especially compared to what we were listening to in the morning? So is the cooperation maybe the answer not to speak about war in a way as we obviously need to speak right now? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, very short answers. Is cooperation the answer instead of...
Yes. Thank you, Simonetta. We were colleagues in the European Council of Ministers, and I do remember your key role and visiting you in Slovenia. But again, cooperation is more and more aligned. National and European policies act on our systems and accelerate. And actually, if we go back to President Niinistö this morning, there are no borders to threats. So this is not an Eastern European context, it's a context for everyone. So we have a unique opportunity again to join efforts and to act.
Thank you, Vilma. Do you prefer to cooperate or to compete?
My answer would be you have to be competitive to be a good partner to cooperate with. That would be my answer.
Marius?
Well, I think I spoke all the time about cooperation, and in fact, when we speak, of course, of cooperation in this slide, maybe we should say European cooperation first and foremost, because this is one of the strongest angles which we can achieve. And by the way, to combine funding and to have always a condition of cooperation, this is one of the approaches which we could do, and it works in other areas. You are now, everyone here is now in the place where everybody is so worried about defense, and of course, defense is the area which is even more kind of goes to the heart of each member state's sovereignty. But by making funding contingent of cooperating, I see that we are moving there. So we can certainly move much faster in this area.
Cooperate within the EU and compete outside is like the essence of the idea of European University Alliances, by the way. So we can, and Tomas, last words belong to you.
No, I'm taking this good life and cooperation as a learning that, I'm imagining now I will tell to my 300 people in a company that, we will not compete anymore. We will target to have a good life in this company. And it will be a culture change as well. So let's see what it brings. But it's a good remark. So I'm really taking it positively. Sometimes, maybe we too much focused on competition as well. So not forgetting good life and cooperation is important.
Thank you very much. This is the end. We are, much behind the schedule. So thank you very much, and wish you a nice evening. And see you tomorrow morning again.
Absolutely. I just.